I'm Cheryl Strachan, Registered Dietitian specializing in heart health and founder of Sweet Spot Nutrition. I'm here to share some tips with you in partnership with the Libin Cardiovascular Institute on eating for heart health when you're on a tight budget.
I probably don't have to tell you that food prices are rising faster than inflation. In 2021, they were expected to rise by 5%, or about $700 for a family of 4. I don't know too many people whose income went up by 5% this year. And if you're on a fixed income, or if you're a student, or you have little to no income, this can be really challenging, especially when it comes to eating for heart health. So before we get into talking about cost, let's just make sure we're on the same page with respect to what it means to eat for heart health. You've probably seen a plate like this before, and this is just a simple but very effective tool for planning a basic meal. Think about having some vegetables and fruit in every meal, ideally about half of the plate or the bowl or whatever it is that you're eating, and make sure there's something in there for protein, and finish the meal out with some grains and starches, ideally mostly whole grains, and about no more than a quarter or so of the plate. Planning every meal this way will give you a great start on healthy eating. And if you want to make it even a little more heart healthy, here's a few tips to keep in mind. Get more of your protein from plant foods. Things like pulses, which is what we call lentils, dried beans, and dried peas, as well as nuts and seeds and fish, and less often red and processed meat. Make most of your grains whole, as I said. And when you think about grains and starches, include your potato, sweet potato, corn, and other really starchy vegetables here. And like I say, see if you can limit that to about a quarter of the plate. Between a cob of corn, a bun, potatoes, French fries, it's really easy for this portion of your meal to go beyond that quarter plate and even take up half or more of your plate. And just scaling that back means you get the enjoyment, the satisfaction, and the nutrients from your grains and starches without them really pushing some of these other important foods out of the way. And when we talk about making half your plate vegetables and fruit, what we really mean here is all the non-starchy vegetables, from eggplant to tomatoes, mushrooms, zucchini, onions, the list goes on. You name it, big salads, soups, or just adding vegetables to mixed dishes. This is pasta, burritos, scrambled eggs, and of course, including some fruit. And this is one of the biggest challenges I find. So we'll definitely talk about how to make vegetables and fruit a little bit more affordable, because this is a tough one for people to achieve half your plate vegetables and fruit. And if you can do that and get a variety of them, different colors, raw is good, cooked is good, however you like them, that is one of the most consistent factors in the evidence for a heart healthy diet. And if you're one of those people who feels that portions are a real challenge, and I hear this all the time, you're not alone, I invite you to think instead about proportions. This kind of meal planning relies on proportions. Half your plate, fruits and vegetables, for example. A quarter of your plate or less, whole grains and starches, for example. Instead of suggesting you should have half a cup of this or a cup of that, that's just, we've moved away from that because every body is different. And on some days you need more food than others. So listen to your body, slow down, enjoy your meal. And if you think about these kind of proportions when you're planning your meal, you'll find it easier to eat more along the lines of what your body needs for good heart health. So how can we do this when we're on a budget? Well, let's talk first about veggies, because fruit and vegetables go up even more than the average price of food. So this can be one of our biggest challenges. So a few tips I have for you here. First of all, make sure you're not wasting any. Any vegetables that go into the compost is like throwing money into the compost. So if you don't have a plan for eating it, maybe don't buy it. We sometimes get so excited at the grocery store to eat healthy that we go a little overboard on buying vegetables and fruit. Instead, what I might suggest is rely a little bit more on frozen and canned. Even canned, both of these can be quite nutritious. Both freezing and canning maintains the nutrients. And you might be saying, hey, Cheryl, there's more sodium in canned foods. And you're absolutely right. But if you're cooking mostly at home, mostly from scratch, a little bit of sodium from canned foods is fine. And most frozen vegetables have no sodium unless there's some sort of sauce added. So just keep an eye out for that. And there's a lot more frozen vegetables than you might be aware of. It's not just peas and corn anymore. You can buy cooked spinach or kale to add quickly to a dish. You can buy frozen cauliflower and broccoli, which are great to add to pasta, or you can even roast them. Just toss them in oil and roast them. They just take a little bit longer to crisp up. You can buy a stir fry mix and get a stir fry pretty quickly. So we have a lot of options with frozen vegetables, and the same thing with frozen fruit. We have frozen mango, cherries, all sorts of good stuff available now. So you should be able to eat nice variety of frozen fruit even through the winter when we don't have as much fresh fruit on the shelves. And be flexible. Most recipes are just kind of a starting point. A lot of times you can substitute one vegetable for another. So if something's on sale or in season, think about if that might work better in your dish than what the recipe calls for. While we're on the topic, make sure to buy in season. Raspberries, for example, are a great buy in the summer, very expensive and not as nutritious, by the way, in the winter because they're coming from farther away and they're not as easy to grow. The last few here I have question marks next to because they may be good tips for you or they may not. So think about imperfect vegetables, or they may be called something else, but some of the grocery stores now are offering up things with bruises or some other imperfection that is mostly aesthetic and doesn't affect the quality or the nutrition of the food. So if you're putting something in a smoothie or soup or a stew, the imperfect vegetables may be just fine. How about organic vegetables? There's certainly a perception that they're healthier, but we don't have good evidence that there's actually any significant impact to health from eating conventionally grown vegetables versus organic. And often the organic cost quite a bit more. So if you can afford that, that's a personal choice. Great, go for it. But don't let that hold you back from buying vegetables or fruit. You don't have to buy organic for good health. And same thing with superfoods. Superfood is a bit of a marketing label. Oftentimes when articles are written about superfoods, they do highlight things that have, really important nutrients, or they're maybe a little bit more nutrient dense, but you don't have to fill your diet with superfoods. And sometimes when something gets really trendy or popular, like cauliflower was a couple of years ago, the price goes through the roof. And really a wide variety of fruits and vegetables is much more super for your diet than any particular thing. So if something's gone up in price, you can skip by it for a while, wait till it gets in season or goes on sale. And if something like acai berries or anything else kind of fancy like that is always too expensive, don't worry about it. You can have a perfectly good heart-healthy diet without it. And, the more processing that goes into food typically, the more money it costs. So if you buy this ultra convenient organic baby spinach at Superstore, it's almost $5. It's very convenient, and I have to admit we buy this because of the convenience, but look at how much money you save if you just buy the spinach bunched and chop and rinse it yourself. Quite a bit less expensive there, but I always want to caution you with that same question mark. If you don't use the spinach because of the extra little work and then it goes into the compost, then that's wasting money. But if you're good in the kitchen and you're sure you're going to use that spinach, you might save a few dollars just by buying it unwashed like this. Or look at that frozen spinach. On a gram for gram basis, the unit cost of this one is even less than half of the regular bunch spinach. So depending on what you're using spinach for, that may be the most affordable way to get it. So last, in terms of produce, I thought I would share for you some less expensive produce items according to a USDA, that's in the United States, survey from 2016, looking at the least to most expensive vegetables per pound. And of course, it's going to vary by season and by location, but generally speaking, potatoes, carrots, cabbage, lettuce, and cucumbers come out as less expensive per pound. And you might look at this list and say, hey, there's not a lot of nutrition in things like lettuce or cucumbers. And that might be true. But if you're having a nice big salad and you enjoy the taste of those things, they can help you get to that half your plate. They're low in calories, carbohydrate, sugar, sodium, whatever you might be trying to cut back on. Combine them with other more nutritious vegetables and fruit of different colors, and it'll help you do that without breaking the bank. Now, potatoes are a starchy vegetable, so like I said at the start, you want to think of that as your quarter plate of your meal, but they're pretty nutritious. They get a little bit of a bad rap because they're often processed so much, but they're actually a good source of potassium, vitamin C, fiber, keep the skin on there, and then that can be a pretty healthy starch for your meal with quite a low cost. Carrots, obviously, high in vitamin A, lots of things you can do with them in the kitchen. And cabbage, I think, is one that people kind of overlook because they aren't always sure what to do with it. But if you have cabbage, maybe you need it for a recipe and you only use half of it, Just chop a little bit into any salad. It adds some vitamin C, some crunch, some fiber. You can stir fry up a cabbage, add a little bit of sesame oil and soy sauce, and make a nice little side dish. So those are some lower cost vegetables that you can get in the habit of using if you want to lower your produce bill. And on the right there, the fruit, the watermelon gets kind of a bad reputation for being high in sugar. Don't worry about that at all. If you have diabetes or pre-diabetes, you might want to spread your fruit servings out and just have one at a time so you're not having too much fruit at once. But there's lots of good nutrition in there. So have yourself a couple slices of watermelon on a hot summer day if you like that. Absolutely. Same thing with bananas. They get a lot of hate on the internet because they're a little higher in carbohydrate than some other fruits, but they're not higher than a couple of slices of bread. They absolutely have a role in your heart healthy diet. I mean, have a variety of fruits. Don't just eat bananas and apples, but as one of many fruits and vegetables that you eat, absolutely bananas can bring you potassium, fiber, and even energy, right? That carbohydrate turns into energy. So that's a good little on-the-go snack. Cantaloupe is affordable. Apples are often affordable and fairly locally grown, depending on where you live. And even pineapple, it's a bit of work to cut it up. As long as you're confident that you're going to do that, grab a pineapple if you see one for a good price. They're a great treat. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about whole grains. This is a challenge I find for most people, getting most of the grains in their diet to be whole grains. And this can be a really affordable part of your diet. So I took a look at one store on one day at the unit cost of various grains. And I will say this is often big bags for these lower cost ones. But brown rice certainly came out on top at 22 cents per 100 grams. That's for a big bag of brown rice. So a good one to have in your heart healthy kitchen. Oats are also quite affordable. And did you know, good for savory meals as well as breakfast. Oats make a great risotto. If you Google oat risotto or if you look for savory oats on the internet, you'll find some neat recipes. Couscous is made with wheat, just like pasta. So if you like couscous, make sure to look for whole wheat couscous. And one of my favorites to recommend is barley because it is high in soluble fiber, which is the kind of fiber that's especially cholesterol and blood sugar friendly. And it has more than twice as much fiber in general as brown rice. So if you can find some barley and use it for more than just soups and stews, it's great in salads. We just cook it like rice now, goes on the side with many dishes, and it's one of our favorites. So a little bit more expensive whole wheat pasta, but that's certainly an option if you like that. Quinoa gets a little more expensive, and then buckwheat and farro even more expensive. So those are fun to play with for some variety. I will say I just recently saw farro at Costco, and it was 66 cents per 100 grams. So that's a much better price, comparable to quinoa, although that was for a pretty big bag. So you have to be committed to eating some of these different whole grains, but at least get some oats, barley, and brown rice in your kitchen along with your whole grain breads. And when it comes to grains, along with a lot of other foods, basics are fine for health in general and for heart health. So this is a fun comparison. Look at this no-name brand Oats, which is less than half the price of the Rogers Porridge Oats Ancient Grain Blend, which again is about half the price of the gluten-free Quick Oats. And you do not need gluten-free oats unless you have a medical reason for doing that. It is not any healthier than regular old no-name oats, unless, like I say, you have celiac disease or some other medical reason to avoid gluten. As for the Rogers Porridge Oats, I had to take a look and see what's so special about these. Why do they cost so much more? Is it just the brand? Is it the ancient grain name? And they do have more different kinds of grains there, the rye, the barley, the spelt. And I kind of wonder, what does that do for us nutrition-wise? So I took the nutrition tables. I know this is a lot of information, but the upshot is here, they're basically the same. For about the same serving size, there's a little bit more fiber and a little bit less protein in the Rogers Porridge Oats, but it's so close that almost could be a rounding error. So I don't think I'd spend the extra money unless you can afford it and or you really like the taste or the texture of the Rogers Porridge Oats. The only one in there that I would say is great to get is ground flaxseed. I would have that in the kitchen and be adding it to your oats, smoothies, soups, and other things because that does add more of that soluble fiber that's so good for cholesterol and blood sugars. But you don't have to buy this whole ancient grain blend to get that. You can just add it in on its own. Okay, so how about protein? So as I said, for heart health, we love the pulses, otherwise known as legumes or beans or peas, and they come either canned or in bags dried. And when you buy them canned, you pay a little bit more. It is much less expensive to buy the dried bags, but they're less work, of course, with the canned. So I thought I'll do a price comparison here for you of a brand of canned chickpeas with chicken breast bought in a club size. So again, a fairly big package. And you can see that the price per serving is about half as much for the canned chickpeas. It would be even less for the dried ones. And these ones are not no salt added. That's the only issue with canned foods sometimes. So you want to give these a really good rinse in the sink. That'll get rid of about half the salt or sodium in them. Or you can buy no salt added ones, but they're not usually quite as inexpensive as this. Next, let's take a look at foods rich in heart-healthy fats and see where you can get the best bang for your buck. I first looked at omega-3 fat, which ideally you get it from fish. If you're not a vegetarian, if you can eat fish, you get a really good kind of omega-3 fat in there for the heart. And so some affordable sources are canned salmon and canned sardines. They'll usually have a bit more sodium, but it's worth it. Those are very heart-healthy foods in there and convenient. And then the other issue with fish is, do you buy wild or farmed fish? The wild will usually cost more. So this again is a really personal choice, but I always say if you cannot afford to buy wild fish, farmed fish is still very good for you. This is another thing I really like about canned salmon. It's usually made with wild salmon, but it's affordable, as well as being shelf stable, convenient, and if you know what to do with it, it can be pretty tasty. Make yourself some salmon cakes or a nice salmon salad sandwich, and you've got a quick, convenient, affordable, heart-healthy meal. You can also get omega-3 from plant sources, and I put a star next to the items in this list that are richer in omega-3 fat, and you can see by the price that ground flax, again, is one of our best bets, price-wise as well as heart health-wise. But chia seeds are okay. They're kind of fun to play with. Make chia pudding or chia jam. Lots of interesting recipes out there for those. Or hemp seeds, which are also very good for protein. Walnuts, of course, another source of omega-3 fats, start to get a little more expensive. So just make sure you've got that flaxseed in the kitchen. And yes, even canola oil, which I know has a bad reputation, but it is a perfectly heart healthy oil. I would use olive oil first in the kitchen, especially for anything not cooked. But when it starts to get up to a very high temperature, you may want to switch over to canola oil, which it's another source of omega-3 fat. And as for flax oil, you can buy that if you like, but you can see it's quite expensive. I think you're better off getting your omega-3 from flaxseed, chia, and hemp, assuming you don't eat fish, because you'll get some fiber with those, as well as a little bit of protein, minerals, and other nutrients. And then other heart-healthy fats. Peanuts are actually good for heart health, and peanut butter, which is just made with them. Ideally, you go for the natural peanut butter, which has just got peanuts in it and maybe salt. Although I'll tell you a little known secret, which is that the sugar and salt and other things that are added to regular peanut butter to keep it from separating are pretty small. So if you're not eating a whole lot of that, it's not as big of a deal to get natural. It's preferred, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. Other affordable nuts and seeds are sunflower seeds, and pumpkin seeds, again, especially at Costco, happened to be a good price when I did my little price survey. So a few more tips in general when you're looking at buying things. Look for some of these marketing buzzwords, which may not add a lot in terms of health impact, but might increase the cost. So you saw with the Rogers Porridge Oats there, that label ancient grains doesn't mean a whole lot health-wise. Non-GMO, very controversial, of course, but we have no known health concerns with GMO foods, and only a few crops here in Canada are GMO anyhow. So if that's a label that's costing a little bit more, I wouldn't worry too much about going out of your way to find it. They're natural is another one, which, things that are natural sound like they would be better, and oftentimes they are. But on the other hand, a snake bite is natural. Arsenic is natural. So that's not necessarily the highest priority for heart health. You go back to my plate model, right? We want lots of plants. We want minimally processed, more whole grains. Natural is great, but if something, say a cereal, is labeled natural versus another cereal that's not labeled natural, it probably doesn't make a big difference. Same with organic, we talked about before. And then national versus store brands, you don't really get a lot more health benefit from national brands versus, say, a no name or another of the store brands. Unless you personally notice a taste difference or for some other reason you want to choose the national brand, I would go with the store brand if you're looking to save money. When it comes to eggs, you can buy omega-3 eggs if you like, but you won't get as much bang for the buck as you would with salmon, sardines, or any of the plant-based alternatives we've already talked about. And like I say, gluten-free and less needed, maybe adding to the cost of the product without really giving you much in the way of health benefit. And finally, a few tips about budget-friendly food shopping and eating in general. Cook as many of your meals as you can. And I know it's not always possible, and sometimes you just don't have the energy or the time. But when you can cook big batches of things like stew and chili and soups, save them into smaller containers, and these will undoubtedly be not only healthier but more affordable than what you would get from takeout or restaurants or even sometimes fast food. Make sure when you're shopping to compare unit prices and buy something with the lowest unit price as long as it's not more food than you realistically will eat. Again, we don't want to throw things in the garbage, right? And watch out. I see sometimes the unit prices are per 100 grams and sometimes per kilogram. So if you're comparing two things, they may look comparable, and then you look more closely and realize, you know what, that's actually 10 times as much if it's looking at per 100 grams. So make sure you're comparing apples to apples, so to speak. And the old saying is true, do not shop hungry and stick to your list. Those two go together. It's often easier not to make those impulse buys if you're not hungry when you head into the store. And again, a few more question marks here. These may be right for you or they may not. Check the flyers and coupons. That's a great way to save some money, but it does take time. And I see sometimes people buying things that they don't necessarily need because they have a coupon or because it's in the flyer. So if it's absolutely something you will use, then great, use a flyer or a coupon. Or if something's on sale and again, you think, yeah, I will absolutely use that, then stock up if you can, if you have the cash flow. And same thing with buying in bulk. Something like Costco or the club size, larger sizes are often less expensive. Check the unit prices to make sure. But again, it doesn't make sense to buy them unless you're pretty sure you're going to actually use all of that food. And again, less processed food usually is less expensive as long as you know you're going to have the time and the energy to put in and actually eat that food. Sometimes, it makes sense to buy that pre-cut watermelon or the pre-cut pineapple if that actually means you're going to eat it. You'll pay a little more for it per unit cost, but if it gets eaten, all the better. And finally, with another question mark, I would add, for some people, it makes sense to order online their groceries. You can spend less money because you're not going to be as tempted to make impulse buys as you're wandering through the store, especially true if you're shopping with kids, right? And once you do this a couple of times, it's very quick and easy. And finally, I just wanted to highlight some local deals if you happen to be here in the Calgary area. Everyone can get 10% off at Sobeys and Safeway on the first Tuesday of every month. Those may not always be the least expensive stores, but sometimes when items go on sale, they're a pretty good deal there, and then plus the 10% off. And if you're 65 or over, you can see that at Bulk Barn, Community Natural Foods, and Amaranth here on certain days of the week, you can get a little bit of an extra 5 or 10% discount, and every little bit helps. So finally, I will leave you with some resources if you need more help. In Calgary, there is a great program called the Good Food Box. The smallest box is $25 for about 20 to 25 pounds of mixed vegetables and fruit. And if you're good in the kitchen and you know you're going to use those all, that's about $1 per pound. It's a pretty good deal for that fresh produce. They have them at different locations around town and you get them about once a month. So I would encourage you to Google that, look up the Good Food Box. Meals on Wheels gets overlooked, but if you are low on energy, if you're recovering from an illness, heart disease, or otherwise, Meals on Wheels can be a great place to get food delivered to your home. And Inform Alberta is an online directory of community, health, government, and social services. You can just type in your postal code and look for helpful programs close to you. And if you'd like more help with heart-healthy eating or making your food dollars stretch or other health concerns, consider working with a dietitian. There are a number of dietitians in the public health system. Check with your doctor and see if they can help connect you with one. And if you're looking for nutrition information online, there's all sorts of different sources and you may stumble on some misinformation. So a good, reliable place to go is the Dietitians of Canada website, which is found at unlockfood.ca. And for more practical tips, recipes, and meal ideas specific to heart-healthy eating, stop by my website at sweetspotnutrition.ca. You can also reach out and contact me. I don't mind answering a quick question over email. I hope this has been helpful for you. Thank you to the Libin Institute for supporting this. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics, feel free to leave a comment below or look me up and send me an email. Take care and have a great day.